Oh, off.
Okay. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for being here, for your time, and thank you, Dory and Sean, who's going to be later, because they're going to be our wonderful guest speakers today. And this is a great opportunity for us to catch up, to talk about experiences. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just share my screen. We'll talk about today's agenda, and then we'll start right away. You can see my PowerPoint, right?
We can.
Okay. So look, this is the image that I found. This is all of us connecting together from all over the world for our wonderful meeting. Um, and today's agenda has three main points. And the first one, I would like us to introduce each other uh, and briefly tell what we teach, what we do in space, where we are in the world. And then, after we introduce each other, let's talk about some of those strategies or techniques or activities or anything you want to call them, things that you find work in your class that are successful, that you feel satisfied with. Then our wonderful speakers, Doria Campora and Sean Gaffney, are going to talk about two different topics. And finally, Rob is going to tell us about launch padding your class. So let me just stop sharing for a moment so that we can start by introducing each other and just getting to know where we are. We've been talking about the weather. My name is Pilar, of course. I'm from Colombia originally. I live in Panama. Um, I love Panama. It's such a beautiful place. And I teach in space, Japanese, fairy tales, literature, and I'm hoping to be able to teach art history one day. So this is what I do in space. Of course, you know our wonderful director, Rob Gosling. And just if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, go ahead, Rob, and then we'll start.
Sure. Jenny and I have been living in Regina, Saskatchewan for just a couple years. We've got four young kids, but it goes fast. Our oldest is already 9 years old, and our youngest is turning four very soon. Uh, so we are just so grateful for this opportunity to work together. She and I, we love doing the space team thing. And before this, I was a high school teacher, teaching physics, chemistry, and biology in a small town. And Regina is home to my parents, where we wanted to come closer to support them as they age. So I connected with Signum University as a master's student in 2014. And then the rest is history because now we're 3 years into space and flying. So a little bit from me.
Right. So who'd like to go ahead? Right, go ahead.
Wait, who? Me?
Yeah, because you were unmuted. So yes, go.
Oh, oh, okay. My name's Isaac Schendel. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and we've lived here since 2017, I suppose it is. I defended my dissertation in 2018, and um, in space, I teach conversational German, Middle High German, and Old English. We're um, we're in the process of planning apparently, and nobody's more surprised by this than me, but a module on mysticism for May, Johannes Tauler. So
That is great.
yeah.
Thank you, Isaac. Harold, I see that you are unmuted. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm Carol Oliver. I'm currently living in California and I teach in the creative writing department. I have introduction to starting to write mysteries, and I'm spinning up some classes on reading and research from the bias of a fiction writer. Some of which I hope will have some crossover interest, the nonfiction one, but that is what I am doing.
That is great, Carl. Thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can go. So my name's Dory. I live in New York. I have, let's see, my background is in psychology and education, and I teach a psychology class, which I will be talking about later. Um, so I'm not really a Tolkien scholar. I'm more of a Tolkien hobbyist. So, I defer to everyone else, especially my students, which I'm always so fascinated that they probably know more about Tolkien than I do. But yeah, so I'm just really, really grateful that I'm able to participate in this sort of open education space. I think it's really amazing what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Dory. Sparrow, go ahead.
I'm Sparrow. I'm broadcasting from New Hampshire in the USA, which is traditional Coassac Abenaki land. I am also a space creative writing teacher where we have so much fun because we're constantly reading new stories and revisions of stories. And I have almost not opened a single traditionally published book in the last 3 years because ever since the very first month of space, people are handing me stories to read, and it's so much fun.
Great. Julian.
Hey everyone, I'm Julian. I'm broadcasting from Brisbane, Australia. I teach creative writing as well as lit, and I've started teaching a few history classes as well in space. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I love teaching in adult education. It was a huge revelation to me when I first started that you're teaching people who want to be here, and that makes the world of difference. So, love being here, love working with my colleagues, and yeah, thanks everyone.
That's great. So let me go back to my PowerPoint here. Okay, so I think we're ready for our first discussion point, and it is just thinking about some strategies that you have used in your classes and that you have found that they are really effective. I took the following comments from the faculty meeting forum so that if one of the comments that I posted here is yours and you'd like to elaborate on it, I would love to hear about that. So the first one that I put is general humanities, and then I have a special one for creative writing. So this is a strategy that a preceptor is using, and they say, I started getting the students to share notes on a shared Google Doc ahead of class for book clubs. These notes form the basis for discussion. It deepens conversation and reduces my workload considerably, which is great because I think if we can reduce the workload considerably, this is wonderful. And I think it can be applicable to other sectors as well. So if you any of you posted these, do elaborate and let us know how is that going and working for you.
Yeah, that was me. I was running the Harry Potter book club and the June book club, and what I was doing originally was taking running notes, almost kind of letting the students dictate, so that there would be some kind of record of what was discussed in the meeting. And also, just a way to kind of capture the discussion because there were so many good points raised. And it was a good way to kind of keep the students who couldn't always make it to class involved. What I found was that it would take quite a lot of work to tidy that up and to get it out to the students afterwards, and I was kind of over servicing. So I decided to kind of flip the classroom a little bit and get the students to write their notes, submit it to a doc ahead of class, and what I do to prepare instead of sort of passively letting the students well, sorry, allow me to rephrase that. The way that I use the document is I look for points that people are raising in on common themes, and I use that as my guide to say, oh, I saw in the document that you raised this point, and there was a counterpoint raised by somebody else, and it just really helped to ensure that all of the students actually get a voice, even if they're not the most talkative. But also helped me to kind of guide the class in the discussion, and I found that students come to class a lot better prepared, and it gives a lot more structure to the conversation as well. So yeah, it saves work and it's better for the students.
Yeah, it sounds great. I think it definitely gets more organized. Students come with some topics in mind already, so you don't have to start from zero whenever you're beginning your lesson, and that's wonderful. Um, Somebody else said a pre-class videos as a warm-up or transition. And I think this is especially useful in language teaching, or because you can show cultural aspects, you can motivate students towards the culture and to learning the language. And this is tied with this one. I love posing questions at the beginning of class to get students thinking. It's another way of motivating students in advance. And but do interrupt me if you posted any of these comments. Let me know. So far, do we have a? Okay, so I think we all agree that posing questions either before the class or at the beginning, it's a great idea for book clubs, cultural studies, creative writing, I guess, as well. And
We often start with some kind of warm-up exercise to sort of signal the brain, leave work behind. Now
yeah,
we're creating.
yeah, that's great. Um, Also, as a warm-up activity, reading short excerpts of Old English poetry with vocabulary supplied to switch into thinking linguistically. And I do know that this was Isaac's comment. So if you'd like to tell us a little bit about this one, go ahead, Isaac.
All right, this is something I do with, I think, beginning with Old English 3 or 4, depending on the cohort. But once they start being able to recognize forms, I kind of go off of the leave the textbook a bit behind, and I found some good excerpts from like the Exeter book, or just short, um yeah, maybe even complete riddles, and just to talk about, why is this dative, why is this genitive, stuff that the students already know. I mean, Pilar, you and I have talked in the past about doing something similar to for the beginning level, um the like more conversational kinds of things, and I think that would work very well as an extension of this, because this requires a certain basic, thinking philologically, or thinking grammatically, but it works at those higher levels.
And I also think that it's a great way of making students realize how much they learned. Because if you start with just a little
Oh
sentence,
yeah,
if you're learning any language, yeah,
yeah,
they
and,
and
and
they
reading
realize, yeah, go
reading
ahead.
reading in the target language, reading the actual document, or reading actual documents. What's what do they say in I forget the pedagogical term, but it's stuff in the target language for speakers of the target language. The term is I'm forgetting at the moment, but it'll come back to me probably at 2 a.m. tonight. But that really that I think is really encouraging.
Yeah. And I can see the applicability of this not only in language teaching, but also perhaps in literature teaching. If you are discussing a certain book and you can start with just a little line from that particular book, or another work by that author that you're not going to discuss, but it's just like a little warm-up activity, I think it also motivates students to go deeper into the learning. I have loved using hold on, Koggle, a mind mapping software. So this is to make different charts and mind maps. Is that the word? Mind map? Yeah. But the idea that I like here is using different tools. If you like Kahoot, if you like, I use Bamboozle from time to time, Kahoot other times. If you know of other tools that you can use, they are always wonderful. And students, whether children or adults, they love using these kind of activities. And I think it's a nice change when you have to use one of these different tools. In terms of creative writing, I put them in a separate place, but I was wondering if we can apply these strategies into other sectors. So here it says, play on the Discord where characters from different stories can interact. If any of the creative writer preceptors added this one, go ahead and let us know about this one. Oh yeah, just look, it's free. Koggle is free, and I'm also curious about it, and I want to use it. It sounds amazing. Yeah, Pearl, I guess that you were muted. Oh, okay. So I guess also using Discord, if you have the chance to use Discord, Space provides a channel for you, and you can play with that, whether you were talking about creative writing and characters in your stories, or I know preceptor Dr. Robert Steed has developed quite a community around Discord, and they discuss many different things related to East Asian cultures and languages, and they have expanded to other subjects, Tolkien things as well. So it's a thriving community. So if you have the time, use your Discord. Another one is, and I love this one, lean into that idea in your story, run with it until something breaks. That's when you'll figure out what the idea is telling you about what you're writing. So in terms of creative writing, I guess, go with your gut. If you have a nice idea, develop the idea, work on it. I was thinking how we could apply this into other sectors. Sometimes when doing cultural studies, if you have a nice topic to introduce, go with the flow. Perhaps you don't need to stick to the curriculum, but perhaps a nice break and going with another cultural idea or aspect of the particular culture that you are teaching can be a nice way. This is really important related to what I've mentioned before about community. Developing community among the students has opened up our ability to work with one another's pieces. One thing that I have done as a teacher in this venue is to say right out in the open when I am having an off day or I'm under significant emotional strain. I think this is great. We're working with adults. We can be honest with our students. When we can tell students, we can discuss things. Open communication for me, it's really important. And just up to now, if someone wants to add anything to what I've mentioned, please go ahead and let me know. Or if you see ways in which these strategies can be used in your own modules, do interrupt me and let me know. Okay, so yes, communication with students and in space. And in Signum in general, we're always open to communicating and just being who we are. Uh, uh, that's what I do. I am who I am, and that's what I show my students. I just added some extra tips for you. Some in these 5 minutes, I'm just going to mention in case you find that this can help you when developing your module. Keep your lessons relevant in the sense that people are coming to your classes because they want to learn a specific topic. So stay within your topic. Of course, you can talk about personal life and all that, yes, but keep your lessons relevant in terms of what your original module is about. Is it about a book? Is it about um, a certain topic? So just keep it relevant. Focus on your learners' life experience. I tell that from the point of view of a language teacher. Whenever you have students, and I guess for creative writing, this is very relevant. You have students talk about themselves, experiences. This really motivates people and they get engaged with the material. I guess with book clubs as well, Julia, you are nodding. If you relate a particular book to people's life, they want to elaborate, they want to go deeper, um, they want to learn more about the topic. Another thing is break up information to avoid cognitive overload. So not trying to push too much material in one session, especially in language teaching, because people don't have the time to digest everything that you are throwing. So there needs to be enough time for practice, assimilating questions, and then a little bit of production or free practice. Provide feedback in the moment of need. So if you see that something is off or strange in your class, make sure that you speak with your students. If you feel the need to provide feedback in terms of the material that you're studying or the dynamics of the class in general, go ahead and do it. And I know people really prefer communicating things on time and discussing things that are happening on time, or just getting to know how they're doing on that particular topic. Make your material stimulating, whether using visual aids or whether combining different things like the warm-up activities that we were talking about, the video here or an audio there, something that you find doesn't get stale. It just moves and flows. But I guess we are all experienced teachers. So when the environment is getting a bit, you know, I don't want to say boring, but when it's getting a bit slow, then have have at hand different activities or something just to change the environment of the class. And finally, encourage questions and discussion. Of course, we want students to participate. We want students to be active and engaged with the material. So I was wondering if you'd like to add something, complement with this, or anything you want to add about this? Now is time. Okay. We can always continue discussing this in our preceptors channel. We're all there. If you remember any idea or activity that you've done that it has worked wonders, please let us know. So I think we're ready for our next point in today's meeting. And we have two wonderful guest speakers. I'm going to introduce them. Our first guest speaker is Dori Acampora. She recently taught a space class called Why Will a Fairy? A Psychological Perspective. And I invited Dori to tell us how to merge two different topics into an enriching experience. This is the first talk. And then Sean Gaffney is going to tell us a little bit what he has been doing to regulate student participation. So, Dori, let me stop sharing right now and over to you.
Hi, well, I'm not going to share any visual. I didn't prepare any PowerPoint for this today. I wasn't sure if that was a possibility. But anyway, so hi, everyone. My name is Dori. Like Pilar said, I teach a class called Why We Love Fairy, a Psychological Perspective. And Pilar asked me to talk a little bit today about some of the things that I did to incorporate the principles of psychology into my course and sort of tie those principles together with fantasy literature studies. So first, a couple of things about the class. I just want to make sure people understand that the class is first and foremost a science class. Which I think is a little bit different than most of the classes in space, which are really language classes and writing classes and literature classes and stuff like that. You know, like we talk about the literature in the class, but mainly we focus on scientific research. So like the readings that we're doing are mostly published research studies. You know, all the citations are APA style. They're not MLA style, which kind of gives you a indication on the type of class that it is. You know, second, the class is focused not necessarily on the psychology of the stories and the characters. Rather, it's focused on the psychology of the reader, right? So we don't talk about like Feanor and his daddy issues. We don't talk about like Gollum and, you know, his split personality disorder and stuff like that. We don't do any of that. What we talk about instead kind of focuses on identifying what happens to us, the readers, when we engage with the literature. So it tries to answer the question of why, you know, why do we find these stories so compelling? And then talks a little bit about how we can use fantasy to cultivate and improve mental wellness. Okay, so that's basically what the class is. So how did I build the curriculum and sort of integrate this sort of psychology piece into it? If I had more time, I would tell you like the whole story with, you know, the 5 years of grueling graduate school, followed by this intense realization that occurred one night when I was at a Fellowship of the Ring concert at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. And let's just say there was this group of millennials and they were all really high on gummies and they were making like a big spectacle. And I'm this Gen X curmudgeon in the audience. And we got in this very like New Yorker, West Side Story, Jets versus Sharks kind of fight. And as this is all going on, you know, it kind of gave me this contemplative moment to sort of look around. And I had these, a couple of realizations. And the first one was that fantasy and imagination, and Tolkien specifically, appeals to everyone. It was like all ages and all walks of life. And the diversity of the audience was like mind blowing. You know, the second thing that I found was that all of these different people were using fantasy as medicine. And the passion and the love and the gratitude that was coming from this audience was just like, again, it was just uncanny and mind blowing. And lastly, it occurred to me, and this was a couple of years ago, that we're entering this time in our world where people are just sort of screaming for this type of medicine. You know, I read and I hear more and more stories about people who say things like fantasy and Tolkien saved my life. You know, people that are reverting back to Tolkien's words to cope with things like war and, you know, all the uncertainty that is all over the world right now. So, you know, those of us who kind of can encourage the increased use of fantasy and imagination and then demonstrate to others how it can help them, I do feel like we're sort of obligated to do this right now. And that's where this class kind of came from and, you know, had that sort of hope in mind. So admittedly, my process was not deliberate in any way, which might not be, you know, that might be different for other people who are engaging with different topics. But, you know, I'm lucky in that Tolkien, regardless of whether or not he knew it, or regardless of how he felt about psychology, was like, he turns out to be like the most amazing psychologist there is. He was like a great developmental psychologist, a cognitive psychologist, an analytical psychologist. I mean, I could just go on. And he presented his psychology in a nice little package called On Fairy Stories. So one read through on fairy stories and the curriculum of the class kind of wrote itself. So for this reason, I used On Fairy Stories as the roadmap for the class. Each part of On Fairy Stories in some way related to a psychological topic or mechanism. And so my process was to present Tolkien's words, um, then identify the related mechanism or topic, define it in scientific or psychological terms, and then present to my students how that mechanism can be further exercised or engaged with to enhance one's wellness. So that's kind of how it came together. I'll give you an example. Um, we discussed Tolkien's words in On Fairy Stories, where he talks about how words, if used properly, can induce what he calls enchantment, and how that can contribute to recovery and escape and consolation. If any of you have read On Fairy Stories, you're very, very well versed in this. We then connect that with the psychological concept of the flow state. And what I did was, I would introduce the researcher, and then the research about flow state, present all the different dimensions of flow state, and then explain how flow state, or enchantment, as Tolkien says, leads to different types of intrinsic gratification. So you see how the two are sort of blended together there. Some other topics we talked about were Tolkien's views on whether fantasy literature was appropriate for children or more appropriate for adults. And what I did with that is, I connected this with Piaget's theories on cognitive development and Kohlberg's theories on moral development. And we would end with a riveting discussion about a moral dilemma. In this case, we did something called the Heinz dilemma, which you can Google. I don't know if any of you have done this before. It's very cool. It's very engaging. We talk about Tolkien's definition of recovery and how he describes fantasy as, he says, it's how you clean your window. I connect this with research by Dr. Michael Rutter, who does a lot of research on building resiliency skills as a protective mechanism. So we talk about all this kind of stuff. I don't think any of my students are in this meeting now, but I think they can, really attest to the fact that we talked about really funky stuff. Like we got into Carl Jung and the collective unconscious and how that relates to fantasy and Tolkien. We talked about spirituality and eucatastrophe. I believe there were discussions about talking chickens and synchronicity, and it just got really engaging and interesting. We talked about fantasy versus delusion, all of that. So that's kind of like a small peek into the content and how I aggregated it with the fantasy studies, aggregated the psychology with the fantasy studies. The last thing that Pilar kind of asked me to touch on, and actually this is a lot of what you already said, Pilar, I'm going to talk about kind of what I did in my classes. So a lot of what I use in my classes come from Castle. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but really good resources, Linda Lantieri and Castle, and Parker Palmer, who wrote a lot of books, author of Courage to Teach. So it's all adult education strategies. So I use a lot of their stuff. So I did my classes, I had 8 one-hour classes, and I break them into 4 parts. The first part, I always play music while everyone's logging on. No rhyme or reason, there's no research behind this. I just, I think I don't love the uncomfortable 2 minutes before everybody logs on when the video's all off and everybody's sort of sitting there. And I ask my students to send me requests, and it's really nice. Everybody, is like, oh my God, I love that song. Or, it sort of brings everybody kind of together, gets them out of their shell. Part 2, just like Sparrow, and I took one of Sparrow's classes and I love this, but I always I start the class with a grounding exercise. And this should take no more than 5 minutes. It's a poem, it's lyrics to a song, something like that. And just like Sparrow said, it brings everybody into the space, because we're all teaching online. Everybody's got kids running around and dogs and work calls coming in, right? And so it sort of like brings everybody into this sort of space. Part 3 is the lecture part, which is your typical PowerPoint lecture. I love to use video. I think I did Jurassic Park in my class. I did, I don't know, a whole bunch of them, but I love to use video and audio in my PowerPoints. So, and then the last part of my class that I think is the most important part is prompted, controlled discussion. And I call it prompted and controlled for a very specific reason. I love discussion, and I think discussion should be part of every class. However, um, there's you really have to make an effort to keep the discussion, especially online, democratic. And when I say democratic, I mean giving an opportunity to the extroverts to be quiet, and giving an opportunity to the introverts to have a space to be able to speak. So I present these discussions almost like games, and they have rules. And the reason why they have rules is because I want to encourage some of the quiet ones to feel comfortable speaking. I get a lot of these games or discussions, controlled, prompted discussions from a gentleman named Stephen Brookfield. And he has a book that's very aptly named The Discussion Book. um, and he has a ton of ideas on sort of how to do this. And so I use a lot of his stuff. The last thing I will say is that I didn't use Discord because I was uncomfortable with it, because I'm not as technically savvy as some people, but one of my students actually suggested it, and it was great. So we were able to use Discord to sort of continue the discussion after the class was over. Anyway, so that's kind of it. That's all I have. But Pilar, hopefully that was helpful, and you guys are all amazing, and I don't know, this is great. Thank you.
It sounds great, Dory. Thank you so much. I like the prompted control discussion. Yeah, definitely something I want to use, and this will correct to teach, I guess. If there are any questions to Dory? Okay, Paro, did you say something, or we can? Well, oh, okay.
Oh, am I unmuted? I was saying, not yet, because that's a lot of good stuff to absorb. Right.
It
And
is.
then I'll come to you with questions, Dory.
You got it.
So yeah, feel free to ask Dory questions via the preceptors channel so that we can continue this. And now Sean is going to tell you, and this is very related to what Sean is going to tell us. He's going to be talking about the strategies to regulate student participation, which is exactly what you were mentioning just now, Dory. So Sean, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm Sean. I have taught a few different modules at Signum. Several of them have been more language related, and some are more literature related. And so my experience with discussion varies. There are classes where it's sort of open for discussion, and there's some classes where discussion just doesn't end up being as appropriate, right? A certain language class, you can ask questions, but discussion, there's not a lot to discuss when it comes to like memorizing a verb form. And so my experience has started off very easy in that the discussions came naturally. I didn't have to do anything special or different. I would say, what do you think? And then people would sort of naturally or organically volunteer a small amount of information, and we would go around. I have several sort of repeat students, and so we are used to each other, and it's very easy to go back and forth. And sometimes our classes go long or whatever. So those discussions had come very naturally. All I had to do is ask somebody what they thought, and we would split the time up. But then what happened more is I had a particular student who was also a repeat student, that sort of forced me to rethink how I approach things. I would have somebody that liked to make comments. Now they were very um, they were very passionate about the topics. They were very interested in them. They had a lot of theories, and what started to happen is they liked to volunteer all of their ideas on each topic, regardless of what we were talking about. If I say the possessive marker for he or his in Egyptian is an F, I would get an interjection. Well, maybe it's because of this. And for a long while, we sort of entertained the ideas and we would discuss it. Very rarely anybody else would have anything to say. And at some point, this began to take over class. So I had to really start to rethink, how do I do this? Because it was easy, because everybody was cooperative before that. And now I have somebody that is a little bit more challenging to interact with. But I didn't think much of it. I thought, okay, well, we can talk about it a little bit and then we'll go back. Um, but so I started to have to think, well, what do I do to either encourage or in some cases discourage discussion? So I would sometimes, try different strategies about leaving questions until the end, if there were anything that wasn't very simple. And that sometimes worked. I would ask or point out to students that, oh, we have maybe a limited amount of time. So if you have questions, you can also write them down. You can email me. Um, I would sort of stress the timing of things. Um, I tried a variety of these ideas and none of them worked. So what this is slowly becoming is a story of Sean's failure to actually manage his class in a sense. It got to the point where people outside of class would have a sort of exasperated, oh, he's in the class? Yes. The challenge is that I didn't feel comfortable talking to the student about it because I couldn't really, I had trouble evaluating to what extent they were aware or in control of this. So it was something I felt very awkward about. So I was really a little concerned about sort of how to address it. And I ended up having to engage with more and more strategies that were um, sort of less ideal, I think, right? So I had to be a little bit more forceful sometimes. Some some of the musings were just so off topic. I would say, okay, well, you and I can talk about that later. And I had started this early to try that. Well, we can talk about this at a different time. Um, but they had a habit of also forgetting to turn their uh, mic off and talking to themselves about it. So we heard the external monologue about things. Yeah, I think that's it. It's the F. Yeah, it's the F. And I would sometimes mute because I just got in the habit of that. Especially my younger kid classes, like I just have to mute people. I can't listen. Um, so that sometimes worked. But I could still tell there was a certain level of frustration with the people around me who just want to move on with whatever topic. And so it got to the point where um, sometimes these strategies would work, sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes, and I felt this was getting more and more the case, I would have to be increasingly curt or abrupt or even dismissive. Um, and I wasn't sure how that was going to go, and I kind of had to try to risk it. And at some points, I would just say maybe, and then immediately no pause. I could not leave that second because if there was a second to continue that conversation, it would happen. So I got in the habit of saying maybe and then just jumping onto the topic. And I think the other people in class appreciated. I don't think that student realized that was happening because I'm still not convinced how aware they sort of were of that level of potential disruption. Um, so I feel a little weird coming to like sort of the end of my discussion about how to manage classroom discussion with the idea that, well, I really just tried to step it down and eliminate it. But that's what in these particular classes, especially because these were not classes um, where discussion made a lot of sense. If we were talking about a certain feature about the language and musing on how it might affect literature, or Egyptians love puns. So if we were talking about puns, then we could do that. But if it was just, this is an N, the sound is an N sound, sure, we could theorize that there is something else happening. We have no data to go on. Nobody knows the literature around this. So I can't respond. I would try to respond outside of class when possible, but really it became a situation where in this particular case, the best solution I could come up with was increasingly sort of ignoring or dismissing ideas. And I felt weird about that at first, but I also don't think it harmed that student. I think the other students appreciated it. Any idea that was important or that they viewed as important enough that they would write to me or ask me after class, then I would fully engage with it. But I couldn't let my class sort of be increasingly derailed by one student's
Yeah.
really unusual musings. Like, oh, Egyptian has an
Yeah.
F. The Eskimos make an F sound, or the Inuit make an F sound too. They're probably related. And they would get to the point where other students would be like, I don't think so. But so that's the sort of the sum, what's the sum total of my solution for dealing with this particular issue, is that I kind of couldn't. And it was a
Yeah.
real reminder that that I need more practice. And that maybe
Well,
there's just going to be
no,
somebody that's a challenge. Um,
uh, I have to tell you, thank you so much for sharing the whole experience. And this is exactly why I invited you to tell us about this experience, because we are always looking for ways to encourage participation, but we also need to know of ways to discourage participation without hurting anybody's feelings. And it disproves how organic teaching is. We have to accommodate to our students' environment. It depends on the group, and depends on the personalities, their needs, their learning styles. So I think you handled it beautifully. What you've just said, you just went with your gut, with your feeling, and with your experience as a preceptor. And I think we can all learn from these in case we need to. So it's never by the book. It's always, it depends. It depends how it works with that particular group. So thank you so much, Sean
and I add
and Dory, for your,
one thing to
yeah,
that is I was lucky that this student, I've heard stories of other students. The student wasn't malicious, offensive, anything. These were related ideas. It was because they loved this
yeah,
topic. They were never insulting or anything like that. So I was lucky that
yeah,
I did not have to deal with what I think of as a significant issue. This was ultimately frustrating, but not
yeah.
bad. So I got very lucky in that sense.
Yeah, and in any case, if you ever have a situation in which you have to have a student who is disruptive or even rude to you, or you don't know how to handle the situation, we are here to support you. You can always reach out to us, and we'll figure out together how to help you, how to best handle these situations. So you're not alone. Sometimes because we're online, working online, we feel alone. You're not alone, and our team and everybody, and I know preceptors are there to help us. So thank you so much, Dory and Sean. I understand that if you need to leave, it's okay. Just go ahead. The recording is going to be there in case you need to leave. And Rob is going to tell us a little bit about the launch planning your module. So let me go back to my PowerPoint here. And here we are. Hold on. And over to you, Rob.
All right, sure. Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Dory. Thank you, Sean. Really, thank you to all of you for meeting with us today. I did want to share about the Launchpad. And so this is a new system, but really it's, to use a phrase of Isaac's, a wish list on steroids system. Because we had a problem where we had 700 plus modules and students would wish list all kinds of uh, interested their interests, and it became difficult to know what to candidate in a given month. We have a lot of intel from our BlackBerry system, but I wanted to be a bit more strategic than that. And so what the Launchpad is on BlackBerry, if you go to the left side, and go to the Launchpad, you'll see 53 modules there right now. And what that is it's a curated set of modules where I try to represent as many of our preceptors as possible without getting too exhaustive and too big a list across all of our 4 sectors in space. And so this is a rotation strategy where every few months I curate those offerings with the rest of the team, and also based on your feedback to me, where when I reach out to you about particular modules you might be interested in teaching, I really want to get the ones that you are most interested in the upcoming months. And here we're targeting May and June in our present Launchpad rotation. The other part to this is that while we can target an upcoming month through this system, uh, we also have been warmly surprised by students who will shortlist items on the Launchpad and they're ready as soon as possible. And so while this system is geared toward a few months ahead scheduling, what we've found is that depending on your availability as a preceptor and the interested group and kind of our numbers, the potential for it to actually run, we're able to launch anytime. And so it really does give us some flexibility once we get some level of interest from students. So how it works is students will shortlist out of those 53, they can choose up to 5 courses and then rank them. And then they provide us with when they're available. But the key thing is it doesn't require a token. And so this is the biggest difference with this system, where before students could wish list any number of modules, but that was not focused enough for us to know when to candidate or what to candidate. This now allows as many students to tell us what they're interested in the upcoming months, but not require a token until the very end, with our commitment that we will try to schedule a section with the preceptor and the interested group. And so what we've seen is that I think students have caught on to the student-centered nature of it. We really want students to feel invited, to know that we really care about their schedules. We want to accommodate them and the preceptor as best as we can. And so the main kind of goal of the Launchpad has been to find out when to candidate or what to candidate and when. And so getting nitty gritty with the dates and times and particular month that we can run. So we have those 3 phases listed here. Thank you, Pilar. The shortlisting phase, number 1, where students will shortlist up to 5 courses on their personal Launchpad list. And then the scheduling phase, where Jenny, Sparrow, and I will work with preceptors and the interested group to try to find a working time. And it speaks to the global nature of Signum, and we have folks connecting from everywhere. We can see that in where all of you are from and where all of your students are coming from. Scheduling is complex at times, and this whole system is aimed at trying to make that easier. However, it's a young system, so we continue to bring in more supports. The third phase is when we get enough students at a working time with you and we say, here we go, May, we've got a candidate at this time. And then those students really, they've been a part of the whole process. And it's at that final stage where they then commit their token, they reserve their seat, they give their vote. And so it flips space to make it as student-centered as we can think of at this time. And we're very excited about it. So we launched the system in December. It is something that we're continually learning from as a team, as we hear from students, as we hear from you. But I invite you to continue to connect with us whenever you have questions about your particular offerings on the Launchpad and how it works. So I want to be conscious of time. We're already at 6 p.m. Eastern, but there is one final thing I want to make sure that you know is you can go to your dashboard and find a section. So to go on your dashboard, it's just under for preceptors on BlackBerry. I could share my screen, but I think we know how to get there, hopefully. And what you can find is whether you have any Launchpad modules right there on your dashboard, and also if the number of students that have shortlisted those particular offerings that are on there. Just a bit of a way for you to gauge the numbers. It doesn't give you the ranking detail, whether it's their top shortlisted item or not, but it gives you just a sense. And then we continue to work with you when we look at candidating in the months ahead. So that's a little bit about the Launchpad, but happy to invite questions now for those who can stay a little bit longer.
Sure. Thank you, Rob. So if you have any questions about anything that we've talked about or any experience, if you like to share anything, go ahead if you have a couple of minutes to spare. Okay. I think if there aren't any questions, do continue the discussion if you'd like. We're going to be adding this meeting to BlackBerry under the preceptor portal, right? So thank you everyone for coming. It's great to see you. We're hoping to do this, I think twice during the year or 3 times. It depends. But the idea is to connect, discuss, and always know that you are not alone, and we're working on this together, and we're here to support each other. So thank you, everybody. I'm just going to stop the recording right now.
You are the heart of Spain.